Here we are. We are live with the Rare Network podcast, episode 14. We've got Bone, Greg Morgan in the house with us from Bone Pool. We're going to talk, everything Cardano. We're going to talk a lot of racing and NASCAR today. This is going to be a really good one. Welcome, Greg. Thanks for coming out.
All right, man. Thanks. Appreciate you having me. I'm a rookie at podcasts, so go easy.
We're going to make it real easy, and I'm sure we're going to have a lot of fun stuff to talk about. Let's kick it off with a little bit about yourself. What's your background? I know we talked a little bit before we got started here. You were interested in engineering, and how'd you get into cryptocurrency and Cardano, and then how'd you get into racing and cars and things?
The crypto thing, really, it was gambling with Bitcoin, poker houses. Trying to win the WSOC bracelet kind of a thing. Not that we ever sat in one or did it, but we were thinking we were going to go do something like that. And so we got to glimpse Bitcoin at that point, but we didn't understand wallets and we didn't know how to hold it. And so it doesn't really matter. It's kind of, but missing that window fueled the fire, by the time we get to 2017, the end of 2016, I guess. And it's like, okay, we missed that, but holy crap, here's this cool, technology. Let's see how it works. And then not long after, Cardano launches and it's like, okay, well, this one up to them. So let's go, deeper and deeper and deeper. And I haven't let up since then on that. So that's kind of the really quick how I got from, into crypto and then Cardano and then just, okay, this is the best one.
That's funny. I did the same. Started off as a poker player, and after Black Friday, when they shut down online poker in America, I used crypto to play on America's Card Room and a few other sites. That's how I learned about Bitcoin and stuff. So funny that we
were
have
using
a similar.
Paxful. It was you get a credit card, you could go to Paxful and you could send we paid an $8 service charge to send a $10 Bitcoin. And today it's crazy to talk about it because it's so much money, but well, that's how it goes.
Is what it is. We all did it. That's how we learned, How did you get into racing? What's your background there? How'd you get into that?
Well, my dad was a pit stopper in the 80s. So he worked on the Valvoline car in the 27 car. Benny Parsons and Cale Yarborough, the celebrities, the drivers that were in it then. But I'd been a way little kid, just kind of getting to see the pictures on the wall and getting dragged to some of the races that we could go to, but not old enough to participate in any way. So then years later, when you're getting into your teens and you're getting that itch, and my brother and one of his friends had a car, and I started going along as just younger brother tagging along, and then the fabrication I think is what really drew me into it. I think obviously we talk about tinkering and engineering and things that's obviously the interesting part, but I like to draw and stuff, so the welder kind of took to the welder pretty easy, and so I just got sucked in by creating things or making things that, oh, cool, here's just another medium, instead of pencils and paper, it was metal and fire, So
that's really cool. I didn't know that. Welding. So you guys do you guys actually manufacture these cars? Or are you using older cars? I know you kind of said
no.
using older model cars, you build them from the ground up. How does it work?
I skipped over a lot of the streetcar style or streetcar based racing. I got into what was, fully fabricated late models in the early 90s would have been what my brother and his buddy were doing. So me getting that shoehorned into their world, I skipped over go-karts and street stock and mini stock and all that stuff. I kind of had to go back and do it later. But so I was introduced to being fully fabricated, that a car would be built, out of the steel rack. You'd pull a 20-foot length of tubing and cut it all up and bend it until you had all the pieces to the car, So that was the end, what I was shown that early on, and that was just figured that's the way you do it.
And what is the team you guys have built around, and what gave you the idea to kind of include Cardano in the Bone Pool and all that? Where did the team you guys have now get started?
Well, the Barnes family showed up through what we call easy to call it a prep shop. A friend of mine had a business where he prepares the customer's car and a fleet of customer cars, and basically they pay to be able to just show up and jump in it, and it's ready to rip and ready to go. So I was working there on and off, and the Barnes family was just one of the customers, that came there to have their cars prepared. And as years went on and those kids progressed, out of the smaller cars and into the bigger cars, we just kind of kept with them. So they've been, family by now. It's almost 10 years that we've been going racing with them. So it was just a couple of years ago when we had an opportunity to even get stickers on Trent's car, period, basically. And since we were already full bore into the stake pool, our best foot forward is to promote Cardano and the things that you could do on it, because it seems like, well, that's going to propel the network further, is going to be all of the toys that we get to showcase, or all the toys that we get to invent and see come through. So that was kind of the basis of it, was if we blast Cardano all over it and we give a way for smaller companies to show off what they have on Cardano, it might make sense to other people, rather than there just being a random Chevrolet with random crypto sponsor. It doesn't really tell a story or make sense or drag people in. So we tried to use all of our years of motorsports and the marketing that you pull from all the motorsports and the years of seeing it on TV, and trying to just blend it all in to give the best we could at the most affordable price that we could. And like I say, racing is really expensive, so at that even at the late model level, it's expensive for a small company to do the advertising. So this is, and now I'm skipping ahead now, this is where like the iRacing thing came up closer to the winter time. We were winding down our season and races we had available, and another friend of mine from our racing community says, "Hey, I've got an esports team, and let's start ramping up on that side, because what are you going to do during the winter? I guess we're advertising with you then." So that's how that got there.
And that's how the whole esports side of thing kind of got started with Hosky and all that.
And lucky we had friends in the industry, like in the motorsports industry, that I'd known for 20 years, and again, that was it made it really easy to do, because it's a buddy of yours, and it's like, okay, man, like you weren't scared of screwing up, because both of you were trying to figure it out.
When you're like a team like Trent and you guys, like, how many cars do you have on the is it a bunch of different cars you have on the team? Like, you get to select like what car fits for the right one car on the team?
Yeah. So in that level, the Barnes family may own 3 cars that are running at one, and there'll be a brand new car being built, and it's kind of the cycle of the cars. They crash and they twist and they wear out, and so you kind of I'll kind of always have one that's a newer one, in the eaves. So there's 3 cars that Trent or his brother Doug would drive, and mostly Trent stayed in one, and his brother Doug kind of got between the other 2. And that's how. And it wasn't always like that. Like most of in the early days, it was just they each had one, and you just had really keep up with it. And if they wadded one up, it was a lot of work to get it back the next week. And then so having a second one that gave either of them a chance to just bolt their seat in it and say, okay, this is the one for this week, while we take an extra week to get the car put back together, right, without thrashing or killing yourself or whatever.
Yeah, that's wild. Like. And that, it seems like, these cars get damaged pretty often. Like, there's all types of fun that happens.
It's full contact. I mean, it's definitely, they got fenders on them for a reason. It's for rubbing them off, like that's, like that seems to be the thing.
How much, like, do one of these cars, like, cost? Like, if you don't mind me asking.
Yeah, right now, I mean, the prices, like, recently, prices of steel and everything has just gone crazy with, so right now it's a lot higher than it was. So you're going to be over 100,000 into one, 120 into a late model, by the time it hits the track and you've got everything done on it,
Oh my God.
You can go further,
wow.
But
That's wild. And then like everybody's pushing the envelope because you want to win. So you gotta kind of
Right.
push the envelope as much as you can, you know.
And there's a lot of rules that keep it at that bay. You know, I mean, like it would go on to 300,000 and 400,000 if they start getting rules out of the book. It would just you would just keep on going. And other series
Hmm.
prove that. If you go look at SCCA has TA1, and it's a really like pretty much unlimited. Like it's you've got to be so big, so wide, and 4 tires. You know, they're like there aren't really many rules to it. So as much power as you can bring in that small box, and as much body and as much tires you can bring, as much suspension design open. You know, like it's a wild race. But the problem is there's like 9 of them. You know, there aren't. It's so crazy and so expensive. Like there's just not enough of them to make it a big series. So it's exciting racing, and it's cool to see because you know machines are awesome. You know,
Yeah.
you got something over 1,000 horsepower. You know, to the ground. You know, that's pretty exciting.
That is pretty wild. I bet those are kind of fun to see for like the fanatics of the cars, like just to how far you can push the machines with today's technology probably gets pretty wild at this point.
Yeah, I mean, and of course, going on into you know we're Neanderthals in comparison to a prototype team or a F1 team or LMP1 or any of that kind of stuff that's um, super engineering driven and super aero car and all that. I mean, the prices of those cars are in the millions. You know, like it's completely different stuff. You know, like
Whoa, that's wild.
yeah.
How many cars are like in a race? Like, are there I kind of leaning on my poker side again. Are there like buy-ins and prize pools and stuff?
Yeah,
Like,
you can't buy in halfway through the race. That'd be kind of wild if somebody's in the pits and they're like, "Hey, I want to get in." Um, no, so most events they'll make the event public, and then you fill out an entry blank, and based on like the amount of people interested, they'll draw up a purse. And so if there's 100 cars showing up, we can get pretty decent money to go out and race. And like some of these purses are 15,000 or 10,000 or 5,000 or like, and it's enough money to that in reality it pays for the expenses of going. You're really not even ahead after winning. The expense of getting the cars to the track and tires on them and the labor to have make it all happen. It's you've spent that much money to
to
even go
go.
there.
That makes
So
a lot of sense. Like getting into the business of it, like that's wild. Like the purses normally cover just your travel and hotel and all that, and
and
probably
of course
tires
not
and brakes and
not all
stuff.
racing's like that. There's other races like it's like some dirt races, man, pay so much money and they race. I mean, they might have really expensive cars, but they're not tearing them up like we do. They're not. They don't have the rules like we do that make it so crazy expensive. And really, a lot of times, the dirt racing would be more lucrative from a team standpoint of trying to earn money as a team than it would be asphalt. Asphalt is, to me, it's a science fair project, and you're out there chasing your dream of trying to get to cup or something. But um, to me, it's more fun of trying to twist the knobs and see what makes it faster.
And like kind of staying within the bounds of the rules. Like what are some of the rules they lay out for you guys to kind of keep everybody confined?
Well, I mean, there's a whole book full of it. So pretty much, they're going to measure the length of your suspension points, the height of your suspension points, the length of your suspension arms. They're going to measure the height of your cage. So you can't come with something that's really small and completely different. You've got to adhere to specs along the way, and specs will have tolerances, and in those tolerances, that's where we find the gray areas where they say, okay, well, we'll give you a half inch of this, we'll give you an inch variance on this, and whether push everything to make the back of the car higher or lower, whichever you're trying to do, is kind of based on where you're going with it, what rule you're trying to exploit. If you're trying to max everything to one direction, it's all that's where to me that's the fun part. And then when they start taking that away, it's not nowhere near as much fun. When you have to buy a part from Monopoly to bolt it onto the car and race it, and you can't alter it or change it or build it yourself, just not interested. It doesn't sound like fun.
That
But
makes a lot of sense. Do like
each
the
their own.
tracks, do each track then like have like when you're on a racetrack, you go out, kind of take some practice laps. Are you then like tooling the car to the track, or
Yeah,
how does
yeah, for
that
sure.
work?
Yeah, for sure. So every track you go to is going to have a different banking and a different like radius to the corner, and then a different grit to the pavement. So all of those things, you're still throwing this 3,000-pound blob off into the corner about 100 miles an hour. You've got the same problem every time, but around a different corner, with a little bit of different attribute. So yeah, you're like a recipe. You're going in there and you're twisting a little of this and a little of that to try to balance it out for what you're seeing. When one tire's getting hotter than all the others, well then okay, hey, here's the red flag, here's the problem. Take some of the load and weight off of this corner, and try to balance it out through the rest of the car. So yeah, that's been the game the whole time is who can show up and in a couple hours of practice tune their recipe to the track the best, and then let's race and see who got it right. Because you also have the tires wear off, the fuel wears out of the you're burning the fuel off and the weight is leaving the back of the car, so your balance front to rear is changing as the weight's leaving. So now you've got another problem that's dynamically moving as the race is wearing on that you've got to plan on and kind of lead into it ahead of time. So there's a lot of, like, I think this is enough, there's a lot of that kind of guesswork going into it, and you shake the dice, 20 different things.
That is absolutely wild to think about, all the like different variables that go into the race. Like as you're burning fuel, the back of the car is getting lighter. And to think about what that does is you're kicking out like the back end going around a corner. Like how many sets of tires do you go through? How many laps is a race and how many sets of tires do you go through?
Well, and so for like, we're still talking about Trent's races with the Cardano car. Most of the times it's just one. And here recently, like the longer races, they'll stop halfway and we'll put on a second set. So they'll call it an 8-tire race, but at times they'll throw strategy in there where they give us only 2 tires at the halfway. And then you kind of choose, well, how do I want to use these tires? Like you've got a choice of where to put them on the car to maximize what you have, So there's some races that they do throw a little strategy into it. You may only be eligible for fueling the car or putting tires on during the pit stop. And you have to make that choice whether you're going to do one or the other. And you're penalized if you do both. So you make so that in that race, the cars will stop 3 times and you get a chance all 3 times for either taking your fuel or taking your tires on either of the stops. So those races are kind of fun because it plays a little bit more into just the follow the leader, but it's a little harder for the fans to watch. And I think this might be something that, a use case for, some of our app developers, a way to kind of follow those races, a way to kind of know who's got what tire on the car, or did they come in for their tires? Have they got all their fuel? Have they,
how much gas do they have left? Yeah.
Something like that, but just like everyone's got a phone on them, so like how do we, make that appear there and people follow along with, how we're doing.
Yeah, it reminds me of like the racing games I've played. Like you can tell the health of your tire. It'll go from like green to red, or
right.
The fuel will go down. Like if you could see that while you're watching the race with every racer and be like, oh my God, he's in first, but I know he's got to take a gas stop where the guy in second can get a little further or something like that. That would keep your attention. I think,
especially short attention span for everybody now. So I mean, like, of course, you've got to have something like that, and TikTok's on the side, right?
What's it been like having like Cardano and Hosky and stuff on the car at races? Like, what are the conversations that come up from people that see the car and stuff?
Well, I mean, it's still the general public. So you're still, what's Cardano? What's Hosky? It's not like you've got people going, oh my God, that's the best cryptocurrency ever. Yeah. So you try to, just answer it vaguely because you can't stand there and give somebody, like an hour of dissertation on blockchain. So you just try to, use choice words kind of depending on how they came at you, what they asked you, what their feel is when they say it, you kind of know what you're up against, So pretty much it's been good. I mean, like when we brought the mascot to Martinsville, that was an eye opener for me. It was the first time that I heard people that were behind the dogs saying, I didn't realize they had a mascot. Wow, like just things like that. Like people responding to it in a way that you could tell they knew about it. They knew what it was, and now they're making the connection with it. Like, oh damn, I didn't, because I was still thinking nobody cares, nobody knows. Like nobody has any idea. But
Everybody's got to look it up. You see the dog on the hood, you got to like figure out like, all right, what is this? Like,
yeah, and
I
I
got
was
to know,
definitely. I was responsible for that one. The putting it, a 5-foot dog on the hood. I couldn't think of anything else to do with the Hosky sticker. The only thing Hosky was mad about was that it was straight. Like when me and Drake put the thing on, we squared it all up and measured it all out and made sure it landed like dead on the money. And he was like, it was his first comment is, why is it square? Like why wouldn't you put it offset weird? So.
That's hilarious. Like, do you think you guys have onboarded a lot of people from that? Like, have you had people that have been like, man, I've definitely looked into crypto because of the car and looked into Cardano?
Yeah, there's I'd say a handful of times that's happened, where you get somebody that's come up and they'll talk to you again about it and now you can tell that they continued their education. They continued to look into it. And it's like, man, that's the one, that's what we were after, but very few will say it or come up and tell you if they are. But it's definitely, it's hard. I mean, like it's, you're probably up against a lot of TV things where, people are, being dragged down a road of negativity, towards it. And then here you're trying to showcase, governance and voting and and they're just, it doesn't make any sense to them because they're still in the, well, it's fake money, right?
Bankman-Fried phase, yeah.
How could we vote with this if it's fake money?
Yep, absolutely. I know what you mean. Trying to onboard people is definitely tough with the past like year or two of news, It's been rough, but now that we've gotten through like all the Sam Bankman-Frieds and the Celsiuses and stuff like that, hopefully people will kind of start to figure it out a little more.
Shout out to Pooh, Adam and Vegas, man, with their Pooh cards. I mean, like that changed a lot. Like that changed, like going from having to explain to somebody why we're going to hold to here's your asset right out of the gate. And now you can then figure out whether you want to secure it or how to secure it, because now you're kind of into it. You've seen it. And if it tickled you, then possibly you'll want to go further. But while we're explaining in this analog of this, crazy world that you got to be careful in, that's like a horrible way of going about the entry, so kudos to Adam and Vegas for that one. Because like, that's pretty, it makes, I mean, flipping that 180 made that the way, like that's just so much easier to, explain.
Absolutely. Are you guys like handing that out at at races and stuff?
Yeah.
Like, what do you guys do stuff beyond the car to like onboard folks at the shows and stuff like that?
Yeah, and that's at most of the races we go to, weather permitting, they'll have what's called a fan walk, where all the cars go and park on the front stretch, and they do an hour where the fans come out of the stands and come kick the tires and talk to the drivers and the crew and all that kind of stuff. And this is where we were able to hand out plushies and hand out Pooh cards and hand out Trent's t-shirts and stuff, just, able to do a little bit more. And that's where we had most of the interactions with the Gen Pop, people, just mom and pop coming to ask, what in the world is this? I see it go around the track, but what is it? And so, yeah, the Pooh cards definitely, Hosky said he had a really great response to it. People that actually went through the process of downloading Vesper and then, claiming the reward, so I don't want to quote the percentage because I've heard several different numbers, claimed on that, the percentages of what it was, but he was content with it, that it was a successful mission. And it was a big old box of them, I handed them out to several of the, at Martinsville anyway. Several of the people that were on like the cleanup crew there, the janitorial staff, I went up and greased them with them because like those poor guys are cleaning up all our stickers that we're putting everywhere. We've got Hosky stickers in the bathroom, on a concession stand, on tire carts, it's on the back of a bus. It like wherever we could slap stickers like T-Gens, we were. So I was hoping those guys didn't mind.
How many races? Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. How many races a year do you guys go to? like throughout a season?
Uh, the schedule would be about 20, but
Oh
Trent's
wow.
schedule was about five that he could make, and those were five races that fit into his schedule because he works at his dad's paving company that is paying for all this, you know. Um,
Hmm.
and so the those five races were flow racing, you know, live streams that we could do, um, and also piggybacked with his brother that was also trying to go because his brother was after a national title and came up really close, but like you know, it's a hell of a run at it. Um, so a lot of the schedule was kind of based on those things, and we just kind of had to, you know, wait for that schedule to be printed and then try to go after, you know, selling those dates, you know. So it's not the typical thing where we have, I mean, you know, bull run permitting, you know, we can definitely do something like that where we know, you know, a year ahead of time that we're going to do these 20 races and everything's all laid out and, you know, which would be, you know, standard race team procedure things. But on these, we're kind of just doing it as we can. You know.
That's really cool. You guys are like really just making it happen as you can and putting it together, and like it's been fun to watch. Like definitely it gets a lot of excitement online when you guys, post a photo or a video of a race or something like that. Definitely you can feel the community get behind it. So it's really cool.
Cool.
What
Awesome.
what like when you got have you guys how often have you like won a race?
Trent has won one race, and it was Dominion, and it wasn't televised. There
No.
was a twin 60 at Dominion last year. It's in September, and it's the only one where we've got the Cardano car in the victory lane. Dog on the B post. It wasn't on the hood yet because we were still like courting, you know, Hosky, like trying to figure out like what we were going to do or how we are going to do it. And
Hmm.
so yeah, that's the only win that we had, and um, a couple of top fives. Definitely, we were in the
Love that.
highlight reel several times, you know, like for good and bad. Um, you know, the Martinsville race from last year, we had a chunk of debris. The ballast came out of one of the other cars and smashed into our car, and you know that was one of the gifs that's around. If you see him like shaking the wheel, he's got this piece stuck underneath the car, and he's trying to figure out and trying to tell us what's wrong. Like, hey, something's wrong with my steering, and like we lift the hood, and like, dude, there's nothing wrong with your steering, and we can't see because it's under the car. We can't see what's wrong, and it smashed the piece of the frame like down to where like the piece of the frame was like another inch lower than what it would have been. And so it took many laps before we had it all up, and he already climbed out of the car by the time we got a tire back on it, like for it to go out and run again. But it wasn't going to be 100%. And we were going to be so many laps down. You know, it was just like, no, man, why go tear it up now? You know, it's
Yeah, don't ruin the car anymore at that point.
kind of did us in.
What's like is that like one of the worst things? Like what's the craziest thing that's happened in a race?
Uh, I mean, I go back to one where this is pre-Trent. You know, this is taking another customer racing. You know, like kind of in Trent's shoes, kind of the same situation, except just switch the sponsor and the driver. Um, we had a failure from the Chevrolet crate motor went through a phase where they had a metallurgy failure, and several of the motors across the country broke like all around the same time, like within like a couple weeks of each other, and the
Oh wow.
entire front of the engine broke off, like crankshaft down into the steering car wrecks. And I have a picture of it somewhere in another phone, but when the record driver comes to pick the thing up, that's when like the piece of the crankshaft like finally fell out of the rest of the car, you know. And I stopped him to take a picture. I'm like, well, we've got to take a picture of this. I mean, like, when have you ever seen the
How
crankshaft
often?
actually on the racetrack, man? Like, this is wild. And it destroyed the whole front of the motor was just gone. Like it disintegrated, you know, it just blew up. And so but it was we didn't realize we were onto something or that there was like a national problem until we posted the pictures, and somebody immediately that was like in Ohio racing was like, dude, this happened to me last night. Like, what the hell? Like, I've never seen this. And somebody else posted, it happened to me a week ago. And so it started popping up with tracing it back to a foundry issue with the blocks, and had some porosity in that side of the block, and it was its failure point, and they just kaboom.
That's wild. Like, I guess you guys like report a lot of that stuff to manufacturers, and I
It's
guess you guys are like the stress test where they get to kind of see what the limits are, right?
Yeah, at certain times, when and there is really no like official reporting or anything. It's usually just social media that takes care of that, you know. But in the IMSA series, the manufacturers will use some of those cars for their destruction testing. Like, let's see a connecting rod. Let's see how far it will go as a stock piece in a race car in a race setting, like at a 24-hour race, and see how many hours it will actually go. And when it fails and destroys the motor and wrecks the car, they all cheer, "Ah, it made it farther than we thought." It's perfect for street car use, you know. And the
Y-
poor guys on the race team were having to put motor after motor after motor into these things because it's just experimental stuff that the
It's
Mazda's
gonna
standing there
break.
going, we know it's going to break, we just don't know when, but keep
Yeah.
going, you know.
Hey,
And so
somebody's got to do it. We got to find the limitation to all this stuff, you know?
and and actually for real, your whatever, you know, whatever little Mazda truck motor most likely has the rods in it that were in that prototype just a couple years ago, you know, proving that they actually will last, you know, this many hours, this much load, you know.
Hmm.
So yeah, so that stuff does happen. It's just usually on the manufacturer side and not on our side. It's rare that we get to see something like that where it's a, you know, where we stumble upon a foundry issue. That's pretty rare.
How, like, I guess it seems like it's a very destructive sport. Like, does a car last an entire season or
Well, they can. It's all random.
they can?
Yeah,
If
I
you're
mean,
lucky. If you're lucky.
and so like the Daytona Talladega stuff, those bodies were so special. If they survived the wrecks, we would start to call them evolutions, you know, because they would actually, it would be like, oh, whoa, it survived. We can make it a little better and a little better and a little better. So they would evolve. And if you had one that finished 3 or 4 races in a row, like, oh my God, like it's like you're sitting there going, I'm sorry, girl. You're taking her back to the track going, oh man, you know, it's your number. I know this is your number. This time you're going to be destroyed. And usually is, you know. I want to say after like um, we did a run of probably 15 over a several years period. We did like 15 speedway races. I want to say like 9 times that they were in a box. So I guess that's about half, but like meaning in a box, meaning that they came back junked. You know, it came back. All your parts and pieces are handed to you in a box. Here, we found this on the track. You know, so yeah, those days are pretty bad, but you build again, you know, and you learn
Yeah.
from whatever you learned that day before it wrecked, and you add it to the new one, and you build again.
That
But
makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And I get a lot of the fun is probably the like building the next car and kind of learning what you want to do differently from the last car to kind of push it a little bit.
oh yeah, and your peers, you know, you go to the track and you're eyeballing on, you know, the other fabricator that's bringing something that he was trying to one up you, or you're trying to all one up this other guy over here that's been faster than you all the whole time. So yeah, you're always considering your opponent is way better than you, and you're always having to work harder than than what you assume they're working on. So yeah,
Is there
it's a
one
and
like evildoer that like wins all the time that everybody like gangs up against or anything like that? Is it
I
more of
mean,
like teams?
no, it may be years ago and where rules were a lot different. Like you might have had somebody being able to run away with something, and but anymore, it's pretty fair to where, you know, a cycle of people win the race. You know, it's like kind of anybody in the top 5 or so has got a good shot at it. You know, so you're not really pissy about it. I mean, usually pissy is boneheaded moves. You know, when somebody's out there and just loses their mind or gets too hot, and you know, like physically gets too hot, and they, you know, lose it and hit you, and you know, now it causes a bunch of money and damage, and you know, everybody's mad and want to fight, and you know, that's typical Saturday night.
That was gonna be my next question: is how often are people fighting? Pretty much every
A
race, or
lot,
what?
a lot, to the point where here recently, Dale Jr. and Kevin Harvick, you know, dragged ZMAX into the Cars Tour. Is a announcement, you know, making sure that that series had a title sponsor to, you know, kind of keep the ball moving. You got to have some wax in there to keep everything running. and they made an announcement there will be no fighting in the ZMAX series. You know, like there's, you know, I guess I don't think it was said as to where you're supposed to take care of it, but you know, you're supposed to assume that it will be taken care of, just not here on the track on TV. You know, so that just came up like in the past week. That was part of like their news thing of them launching that. I mean, shout out ZMAX.
Yeah, trying to keep like cooler heads on the track for all the advertisers and stuff like that.
I mean, it's a professional thing, you know, like it's one of, I mean, yes, the fans definitely want to see, you know, knuckles being thrown. They absolutely want to see that stuff. But like the corporate people, you know, I mean, they have rules that they've got to follow for, you know, their people, you know. So you have investors, you know, you have rules, you know, so they're obviously, you know, catering to that stack. So kudos to them, because it's making a clean place for us to bring our corporate type or our companies, you know, that are, you know, branching into this world and going, hey, well, we want to play too, and we want to show that we, you know, we want to play, you know, clean and not dirty, and you know, but yeah, like definitely it's bittersweet, you know. You inside you want to see the fight too, you know, but like you don't want to see anybody get hurt. You just want to see them, you know, somebody get mad about getting taken out or something. It's like rightfully so, you should be mad, you know, like it's no fault of your own, sir.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so like what are your plans with like Bone Pool in the future or anything like that? Do you have any plans coming up or anything like that?
Well, nothing big to announce or anything. It's pretty much, you know, all systems go. Like I believe Krista made some upgrades to the pool, and you know, it seems to be really quick, and we're, you know, we're minting blocks pretty regular. So everything's rocking on that front. As far as no real major announcements, are working on a website. Block Metro, shout out them. They helping me. Potato has been helping me, you know, figure out my website's been a nightmare for years now, and pretty much just adrift. I don't know what I'm doing, and so it should be a whole lot better. It should be a lot more Web3 friendly, where you actually connect your wallet to it, and hopefully it links us to play games like in our Discord, where if we're playing like I guess that block, like how many blocks will Bone get this week, and we'll give away Hosky tokens. And it's I've been playing that game for a while, but it's kind of been manual and kind of hard to go back scrolling back through. All right, who voted 5 and who voted 4, and you know, okay, but it'd be cool to have it like just kind of automated, whereas
Automated.
you know, where you dump a bunch of Hosky into like a vending machine, and whoever wins is eligible to you know, withdraw or whatever. You know, I'm not sure how he'll build it, but it's something on that front, I'm sure.
Really cool. What's like the Bone Pool mission, would you say?
Well, really decentralizing the network. I mean, honestly, I'm ate up on the idea that we need a decentralized network to be able to vote, you know, to be able to have, you know, all these things that we're building. We, you know, we can't give up that leg of it. That seems to be our strength. So anything that promotes, you know, pushing stake to the edges, you know, like those ideas made sense. You know, it was a catchphrase from back then, but if you went and looked into it, you know, you really saw how you know, Pledge would help the Sybil attacks, and having, you know, more and more delegation out, you know, on the smaller ends, you know, flattened out that curve to where everything was even across the board, or more even. You know, of course, nothing perfect. So yeah, that was probably Krista and I, you know, seeing that as, okay, this is noble. You know, this is something to go after. This is a reason to have a business, or what, you know, like to be part of something. You know, that's so really, truthfully, that is the goal of it, is decentralizing the network. Along the way, we if I know I haven't mentioned in this podcast, my business partner Krista has been a friend for a long time in the motorsports world. She's a driver in SCCA. It's the E46 series. That the whole entire series is nothing but BMW E46, you know, class cars. So we had worked around each other in different circles, and then just a good healthy chance meeting of her needing, you know, welding services done. I sparked the conversation because I knew someone in her family was IT related, and I had only assumed, you know, that it was her husband, you know, because she's the one with greasy fingers and her fire suit tied around her waist and, pulling the engine out of the car and, all that kind of stuff. I'm sorry, stereotypically, I figured it was her husband that was standing there with the clean shirt on, not getting involved. And then as I was asking her, she's kind of like looking at me like, is this a joke? I'm like, no, I'm sorry. I just assumed somebody in your family was IT. She's like, no, it's me. She's like, I've been a server security specialist for over 20 years. And I like fell over, I was like, oh dear God. Like, do you realize like we were meant to meet each other right now? Like, this is great. So, yeah, so she bit on really quick to it, like what we were laying out and what Cardano could do. And it was probably a month or two later, she got back to me like, hey, how serious are you with this? And I'm like, I've got the coins if you can pull it off. If you can run the server, then then let's get together and do this. And she's like, okay, we'll start slow and we're this and that. And the ITN was coming up. And so we got into the ITN as delegators and we played there. And then when it launched, she started her mainnet thing. And I think it was Epoch 254 was our maiden voyage thing, shoving off. And we've just been rocking since then, just trying to chug along. And of course, shout out to Hosky. I mean, without that, the rug pool thing, we'd have still been down in like no delegation land, most likely, so that catapulted the brand and the idea and was, got the car further out there. I mean, the car was already out there. We were already doing the Cardano race team. And that was, like the best we could do. But, Hosky blasting it, to his 60,000 followers or 90,000 wallets and all that, that really amped it up. And, and good for everyone else that got involved in advertising on the car, because again, like they wouldn't have got the that recognition either. It would have been hard for, kudos to Hosky for kind of paving the way on that, taking the chance on us.
Absolutely. It is really cool what he's done for the community, and even so what he's done for the car. That's a really cool story to hear. Like, what are, for the people listening, like when it comes to sponsoring the car, like what are the sponsorships that are out there that you guys are looking for? How do people get in contact with you about that? How does that normally work or go about happening?
Really impromptu, DM is fine. If you got a project that you're looking to blast, and it doesn't have to be Cardano. I mean, like obviously we're open to cross chain things and everything, but like I doubt an Ethereum project wants to blast in the Cardano car. Seriously, but to our VeChain friends, our Ergo friends, that kind of like seemingly we align on a lot of things, with the tech. Like it's definitely open to anyone that wants to, push for, Web3, push for all these ideas, push for doing it decentralized, push for, if anyone's behind that, well then, yeah, we want your, we want to blast your logo. We want to promote that also. Cost wise, like something what Hosky did, that's $2,000 per race to sponsor the hood. And Discoin come along recently, it's $1,000 to sponsor the tail. So those are like the biggest parts of the car that, that we have like for making the biggest splash. The logos in between, really, I got in trouble kind of, the car owner really didn't like the idea of a splotchy car, that if we were going to do many different logos, then we needed to go and take the time to develop a design, a wrap that made all of it look good and helped all those companies look good and all that. And that was definitely an idea early on, until we saw, well, what it would cost to have all that kind of stuff done was just another fee that added up, that like, well, man, who's going to pay for that part? Like, wait a minute, we've stripped this down to be as cheap as we can, but damn, man, we can't do it that way. So the idea of we had to put a limit on kind of the size of the sticker and the cost. So $750 is about the cost of a set of tires. And this was what was said, was that's about the limit. If they want to sponsor a set of tires, then we'll blast their logo pretty good sized on it. And, here we go. But anything below that, like, man, you guys probably need to pool together and, and buy a set of tires together and put one logo on it, rather than a bunch of your little ones, at least, that was his wishes as being the car owner, and I totally have to respect it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Absolutely. Are like tires like the most kind of expended thing in a race, you would say? What's like
Probably,
the
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, because you need a couple sets to go to the track anyway, and if it's going to be if it's going to be two sets of tires during the race, well, you need a third set to have during the practice. So those races are pretty expensive, especially now. Add the barns have two cars they're fielding, so that bill is quite high on the tire thing. They're spending $5,000 on tires, like right, just no one going to the track, they've got that bill, so yeah. And fuel's $13 a gallon, and both of them need 20 gallons. And we'll burn 10 gallons at least during practice, and then another 20 gallons during the race, or more this time. And we probably burned almost 40 gallons in that 250. Like, so it was it's expensive.
It's an expensive hobby.
Yeah.
Job.
Yeah.
Career. That's wild.
And say, luckily we have businesses and parents that want to see their kids do well, and they want to go out and find the motorsports industry professionals and grab them and bring them to a short track and say, hey, do all the things you were doing at that big money team and do it for us. Make our kid look good, and that's the idea. And so over the past dozen years, I'd say the short track world got really competitive, because a lot of the bigger teams were having trouble finding the money because economy going to shit, and a lot of the shops would shut down or minimize jobs, and so that would leave people in limbo, or people having to decide, okay, do I pack up and leave my dream and go back to working a heat and air job, or do I stay in this mecca for racing and try to continue racing? It's definitely a real thing for a lot of people. So the short track, there's several different short track genres. And so in this southeastern area, it kind of employs a lot of people. Thousands of people are really employed by just using the barns as an example. A family that enjoys racing, they know where their kids are on Saturday night. They don't have to worry about them out doing bad stuff. They're probably now they're trained athletes. They're going after trying to make themselves stronger, and so it's definitely not a bad avenue for the families that have the means. And we can see with the barns, they continually bring in their friends and neighbors and use it as kind of a little party, a little like picnic or get together or something, where they've got a nice trailer to stand on top of and watch the races while it's going, and they're jumping up and down and cheering for the kids. Like they're enjoying themselves at the races. So it's great to see that kind of stuff. And again, it's not just that family. You can kind of times this by 20 and 30 as you look, down pit road. You see that happening over and over.
I love that. That's a great story. Like, I never really thought about like the economy built around racing and how many jobs it provides and stuff like that. Like, not just on the track, but all the engineering and tires and parts and all that stuff behind it. I never really thought about that. So that's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, for rednecks in circles, right? We're just a bunch of hillbillies running around in circles, man.
That's funny, and it's really cool how like you kind of like get community out of it. It's like Saturday night thing for the community to get together and party and have some fun. Like you said, know where your kids are and getting into some fun activities and stuff like that. That's really cool. How do you want, like, most people, if they want to reach out to sponsor the car? Is it through Twitter DMs that the best route?
Yeah, Twitter is probably easier. Any way that if you see me on Spaces, I'm usually in several different Cardano Spaces all the time. Really, I think I'm easy to get a hold of. I'm on Discord. I haven't done Facebook much, but yeah, Twitter DM is probably the easiest thing.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Like, honestly, for a rookie podcaster, you've certainly done it like an expert today. Any final thoughts for anybody watching or anything like that? Anything you want to end with?
Yeah, steak with SPOs.
There you go, steak with bone pool. Okay. I appreciate the time, Greg. It's been a good one, and we'll have to have you guys back on as the season kicks off in the spring, and hope to see you guys at Rare Evo in Vegas.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Yeah.